Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, an interview-style podcast providing insights on how to lead people. Proudly brought to you by Human Interactions Australia. Welcome to Leadership Unlocked. It's an exciting time today. We've got our new guest for the month, and today I'm really proud to say that we've been able to secure Steve Hinks, who is the Director of Taronga Western Plains Zoo. So welcome, Steve. Great to have you.
Thanks, Craig.
Tell us a little bit about the zoo. It's a bit of an icon, I believe. So tell us a bit about the zoo. You get a chance to plug it.
Yeah, sure. Look, everybody knows Dubbo as the place that is home to the zoo. Taronga Western Plains Zoo, which opened in 1977, was Australia's first genuine open range zoo. Very, very historic moment in the zoo industry for Australia. But it's a fantastic attraction. We operate 3 different streams of accommodation, including the multi-award-winning Zoofari Lodge, and it's part of Dubbo's tourist landscape, which now is widely regarded as the #1 family holiday destination in New South Wales. So a great place to bring the kids.
Yeah, fantastic. I've been fortunate enough to visit the zoo a couple of times. It's amazing. It's an amazing venue to go to.
Yeah, it's a magical place. I feel very fortunate to work there, I must admit.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of work out the back end there with the water park and so forth too.
Yeah, we've been fortunate to have around about $50 million to do a capital redevelopment of the site, a master plan redevelopment of the site. So that's included a number of new exhibits, new experiences, including the Savannah Safari, which you can get on the safari truck and drive around. Nice. Multi-species exhibit, which includes giraffe, white rhino, eland. Fantastic experience that kids love.
Yeah.
And also, as you mentioned, we've just built the Waterhole Cafe precinct, which includes a water park for the kids. So mum and dad get to stop, have a nice bite to eat, grab a coffee, maybe a wine if you prefer, that's fine. And the kids can play in the water play and, recharge those batteries for the back end of the zoo circuit.
Nice. And I'll give you a bit of a lead in with your plug as well, because I know there's been a massive, I think it's a grant to do with the platypus. Tell us about that, because I think this is a really exciting piece of.
So we're first and foremost a conservation organisation. Everyone's aware of the impact of the bushfires that we had last summer, and of course the drought that gripped regional New South Wales for the last 3 years, the worst drought on record, as a matter of fact. That has had untold impact on the wildlife that we have in our region. Our wildlife hospital is responsible for the care of not just our zoo population, but also the native wildlife in the region. They see over 600 cases per year. That number is steadily growing. So we've been really fortunate to have the support of the Deputy Premier and the Minister for the Environment with a grant of just over $22 million to create a new wildlife hospital, which instead of being behind the scenes like the old one was, it's going to be on exhibit. It's going to be in front of the public with glass-fronted surgeries so that our visitors will be able to see the incredible work that our vet team do. On top of that, we will be constructing a platypus rescue, rehab and research facility. So if you think about koalas, we know the state that koalas as a species are in at the moment. If you go back about 10 years, if someone had intervened in that situation 10 years ago, then their trajectory could be very, very different. So we're trying to do that with platypus before it gets to that critical stage that we know koalas are at the moment. Of course, we're doing everything that we can to continue to save the koala, but we want to get in at the ground floor and deal with this issue for platypus, because with ongoing drought, with stress on the river systems, even with bushfires, then the ash gets washed into the river systems, and that actually plays a really big role in the fast declining numbers of platypus. So we're trying to get in on the ground floor and solve that problem before it really becomes a big one.
That's going to be exciting. That's going to be an exciting exhibit, I'm sure.
It's a really, really exciting project.
So we're here to talk about leadership and help up-and-coming leaders and also those that have been in leadership roles for many years. Tell us a little bit about your history in leadership and where you've been and what you've done, so we've got a bit of context.
Sure. So my career has been around just over 20 years in the tourism industry. I did a few other things before that, which was, everyone has a past, and that's fine. So within tourism, I started at the ground floor. I started as a tour guide with a small company that was running guided tours to the summit of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And this was back in the early part of 2000, before the Olympics rolled into town. And at that point, our business went from a very small business to quite a large business within 6 months. There was a lot of growth. Best time to start a tourism organisation, I can tell you. So I went from a frontline role into a supervisory and then a management role quite quickly. And that was, without giving my age away, in my mid-20s, before I had the life experience to really know what I was doing. Learned a lot of lessons along the way about people and about how to manage versus how to lead, how to get the best out of people and how to really put your foot in it at the same time. So that was a great opportunity, and I stayed with Bridgecline for a bit over 10 years. Went back to uni to do my Masters of Business Management, which I did through Charles Sturt University, and then that helped me leapfrog into general management. So I became General Manager of Wildlife Sydney Zoo with Merlin Entertainments. That's a global multinational. Then went on to have the General Manager role for Sea Life Sydney Aquarium, Madame Tussauds Sydney, Sydney Tower Eye, then be the Head of Regional Operations for Merlin for Sydney, and then eventually when I left there became the Director of Taronga Western Plains Zoo. So I've had a pretty varied role in almost every major tourist attraction you can think of in Sydney and now broader New South Wales. So
when I hear, there's many questions coming to my mind, but I guess one of the questions I figure comes out of this is, when you're working in those environments, it's, the zoos and the sea life and so forth, there's an eclectic bunch of people that you're managing, from those that are very animal focused and to your operational type person. Tell us a little bit about how hard or how easy that can be, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's probably two key points to this. One is, where does your power base stem from as a leader? Now, for a lot of people, it is around being the most experienced or the most knowledgeable about the subject matter in the room. And so a lot of people move through their careers, whatever that might be, like it might be operations, it might be HR, it might be marketing, it might be accounting, whatever. And you will be promoted because you are good at your job, you know the most, and you're the subject matter expert. That's fine. When you step across, though, to general management and you're covering a variety of skill sets, you might know the most about one particular area, but certainly not about others. And this rings true in any business. So if you've come up, as the CFO, and then you become the CEO, and then you're managing marketing, you're managing operations, all those sorts of things, you've got to then manage people that know more about their job than you do. So your power base needs to shift from being based on knowledge and experience to actually being able to help people and facilitate them get the best out of themselves and the best out of their teams. Now, I think that's inflamed in a zoo environment because it's so unique.
Yes.
And obviously my background is tourist attraction. So my strength is around managing the operational efficiency, around making sure that the visitor experience is first class. I'm not an animal keeper. I'm not a vet, yet I manage those teams. And so the only way that I can do that is by inverting the pyramid. I talk about this a lot with my team. The traditional hierarchy that we're all familiar with is the standard pyramid, the boss at the top, the middle managers beneath that, the frontline team, that's the broader line underneath that. That's great for information to flow downhill if the boss knows everything.
Yeah.
But it's not a support structure. So if you flip it on its head, the CEO or the director role sits at the very bottom. They are then supporting the middle managers who are then supporting the frontline team. Now you can visualize that, and as soon as you do that, it flips your thinking on its head, and it makes you realize that you are not sitting on top of the heap in control.
Yeah.
Your role at the bottom is about supporting those within your care.
Very different mindset, isn't it, from being in control versus being there to support.
Yeah. And I think once you make that shift, that then it comes out in everything you do. And those teams who might know more than you about certain subjects, they don't feel like you're trying to tell them how to do their job, right? They feel like you're supporting them to get the best out of themselves.
Well, that's where the conflict happens, right? If you start to tell them what to do and they know better, it's like, well, who are you to tell me what to do?
Yeah, exactly.
That's when it can go awry.
Yeah.
So you say you've learnt some lessons had along the way, as many have.
Yeah.
Are there some standout? Let's start with the negatives. I think if you're happy to be vulnerable.
No. I'll go there. That's fine. There's a great situation that happened for me very early on in my management career. Now, I've never been one to shy away from a challenge, okay? So a tough conversation's a conversation that needs to be had. Let's do it. That's fine. The worst thing you can do is go and hide in the corner as a leader. No one paying you to do that.
Yeah.
So very early on, when I was working on the bridge, one of our team who was supervisor out operationally on the bridge radioed through to me as the duty supervisor to report what they considered, was something that needed to be followed up with one of the guides about their, adherence to safety protocols on the bridge. I won't go into details.
Sure.
So anyway, I said, yep, not a problem. I'll have a conversation with this individual. And when he came back off, pulled him aside, I said, look, I've had this report. This is what you've done. Needs to stop. There's safety protocols for a reason. We need to follow the rules. He stood there and he said, that's absolute rubbish. I have not done that.
Oh.
This is not true. I said, well, look, I've had the report. I don't see a reason why this person would be making this up.
Sure.
So I need to follow it up. I just need you to take it on board and change your behaviour. I thought I handled it pretty well. He then sat there and said, are you calling me a liar?
Oh.
And, you kind of, the ego kicks in a little bit. And I said, look, I'm not using those words. They're your words.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is I've had this report. I need to deal with it. You need to deal with it. So anyway, that escalated a little bit. Didn't end well. He stormed out of the building. And I thought, wow, that's not great. But you know what? At least we've had the conversation. It's done. We can pick it up tomorrow. The on-site supervisor came in at the end of her shift and I said, look, I've had the conversation. Didn't really go that well. Was there a bit more to the story? And the report was, oh, yeah, sorry. What I meant was he usually does it. He didn't do it today, but he usually does it and I needed you to deal with it. And I immediately thought, right, well, I've just, created a problem that didn't need to be there. So we had a conversation. I think, look, the lesson was, don't shoot from the hip.
Yeah.
Investigate, find out all of the information, listen, give the other person an opportunity to state their case and take on board rather than just challenging with a preconceived outcome in mind when you move into these conversations. So that stayed with me. And now any of those tough decisions or tough conversations I have to have, really the first thing is to go in there with an open mind and to go in there giving that other person an opportunity to state their case and not to go in there and think that you know the answers before you listen.
It's like bringing up kids.
I'll tell you, managing people, raising kids and training animals are exactly the same.
It's an intriguing one, isn't it? That because you talk about your power base, or in that case, you've got the power, you're the boss, and we're shooting from the hip. Often when we think we're the boss, we talk about people having, power going to their head. It's an intriguing space that people get to.
Yeah, and I don't think it's often deliberate. I think a lot of the time as a junior manager, you put pressure on yourself thinking that you need to know the answers and that to demonstrate that you don't have the answer or the solution is a sign of weakness. So you want to avoid that.
Yeah.
When actually the opposite is generally true.
And have you heard, I know that for me, I get really frustrated with fads that happen through leadership and management. Have you experienced any fads yourself where you went, and you jumped on board with it and everybody jumped on board with it, and then a year later or 2 years later where you went, oh, well, that really didn't work, did it?
Oh, there's a lot of them.
We need to probably be careful about what we name, but the concept.
Look, I'll talk about a word that I think has been completely overused over the last 12 months during the period of time impacted by COVID.
Yeah.
It's impacted all of our businesses in a variety of ways, some good, some bad. The term pivot absolutely rubs me the wrong way because basically what you're saying by pivoting is that we're flipping what we're doing and we're making, it's not incremental change. It's not minor adjustment. It's a complete 180 degree flip, right?
Yeah.
And I think the word pivot, to be honest, it's one of those fads and it's one of those buzzwords that's being thrown around for we're just going to change the focus of what we're doing. So we'll call it a pivot because that makes us sound cool. I read a fantastic article which said, can we just stop pivoting already? Because what happens is for many businesses, you're actually starting to veer away from your core business. And this can be very, very dangerous. So whilst it is important to react to the external environment and it is important to shift and it is important to learn and to adjust and all those things, you still need to keep an eye on what your core business is and deliver that well.
And that's why you were in the business in the first place.
That's right.
So unless that business doesn't have a place anymore, which I doubt, then, you're right. That's what you were there for. What is your core business? But how do you maybe do it slightly differently? How do you adjust? Right.
I think that's the point. To answer your question, it's pivot's the latest fad. Everyone wants to pivot, and people have stopped focusing on what their core business is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so, what are some of the greatest lessons you've learned, you think? And 1, 2, or 3 lessons that you might have learned that have really stuck with you, that you consistently use those techniques?
Yeah, there are a few. I talked already a little bit about the inverted pyramid, and that leadership is service, not control. That's probably the first one. Another one would be a lesson that I learned, again, relatively early on, which is about the importance of values, of values-driven leadership rather than, potentially outcome-driven leadership. For me, operating in the conservation space and the not-for-profit space, this is probably more relevant, obviously more relevant, but I think it still rings true for a lot of people in businesses. And we always hear the horror stories about how ethically poor decisions really undermine businesses and individuals. So values-driven leadership, I think, is important. I was challenged early on by a organisational psychiatrist when I went for a role and had to do the full psych test. Who, and you do the cognitive test and you do the personality traits test, all those sorts of things. And at the end of it, she'd said, look, you've scored quite well. What I want to know is, what are your values? What are your personal values?
Oh, right.
Yeah, really interesting question, which I found extremely difficult to answer because I hadn't taken the time to sit down and get it to a point where I could explain it. And I'm thankful for that because, having been forced to do that, that really enabled me to define the fact that I wanted to work in a role that contributes to societal benefit. I wanted to work in a role that enables me to assist others to develop and others to achieve. And I wanted to work in a role that, that leaves the world in a better place than I found it. And that helped direct me for the types of jobs that I would apply for, and to understand then that the jobs that I went for matched who I am, not allowing my career to kind of, start to dictate what my values were. Really interesting exercise that I'd absolutely recommend people do.
Too easy for people just to follow the dollar, I think, or follow the title perhaps as well, rather than really just taking that time out and saying, how does this align with me? How does it align with my values? Obviously, the zoo does that.
Yeah, and there is a third one, which is probably worth talking about, and that is to look at, when you're doing planning exercises, certainly strategic planning, to a lesser degree operational planning, is to look at what your perfect outcome is. Rather than starting where you are right now and looking at incremental change, which is what most people do. They'll take their current situation and say, if I could just tweak this, if I could do this, I'll improve that, and I'll make some improvements, and that's fine. But I don't think you ever generate true step change by doing that.
Sure.
Rather than saying, okay, I'm going to take where we are at the moment, and we're going to park that to the side, and I'm going to look at what that perfect future might look like. And then we're going to define that, and then we're going to work back from there, and then that becomes our strategic plan.
So that's Covey, right? Stephen Covey's
exactly
begin with the end in mind.
And we did that when I came to Taronga Western Plains Zoo. My very first moment when I had to drive 5 hours to work that day from Sydney to Dubbo.
Oh wow.
It gave me a long time to think about my initial presentation to the team, because the first thing I was doing was getting the management team together. So here's the new kid on campus. This is my view, and I remembered leaving Sydney thinking, how am I going to position the future? What I'm going to talk about, and I thought, I'm not going to get in the room with all the managers and say, all right, guys, I'm the new boss. You know what we're going to do? We're going to achieve incremental growth by small year-on-year changes. That's not going to inspire anyone. And after that 5-hour drive, I boiled it down to one sentence, and I got up there and I said, we're going to make this the best zoo in the world.
Yeah, nice.
That's it.
Nice.
And when we did that, that infiltrates all of your thinking. And you say, all right, what's the visitor experience look like at the best zoo in the world? What's the animal population look like? What's the healthcare look like? What's the team management look like? What does the financial management look like? What's the P&L look like at the best zoo in the world? Because it's really easy to spend, but you've also got to make sure you manage the cost side of the business. So it can infiltrate everything that you do.
It's a great filter to look through, isn't it? It's an excellent filter. And so we do a lot of work with leaders and making sure that they self-aware of their own behaviours. I feel like you've got an awareness of your own behaviour, and we use DISC is what we use, and we love it because it's so reliable. Have you used those kind of things before, and what's your take on using these things?
Yeah, I've fortunately worked with a lot of those different personality tests and behavioural tests, behavioural assessments, and for me, I guess I look at it slightly differently to some people. I do see that there is importance in this for understanding your own behaviours. Absolutely. I think that they can get misused, and there is danger at times with pigeonholing other people based on just a small snapshot of information. Yeah. So I think if you go into these programs with that in mind, that's good. And I've worked in organisations and heard horror stories of organisations where they'll go into meetings and say you're a D, or, you're an S,
I'm guilty.
I would expect that from you because you're a C. Obviously,
I'm guilty of it. I think we taught that many 20 years ago when we were teaching this stuff. That's how we taught it. It's like, I know, and you can't. I mean, you can imagine how you feel when you hear that. You're like, no, I'm far more than just a D. So we've got to be mindful of that. It's good to understand your own behaviour, and I think one of the things that's important is to understand that with every strength, there's an associated weakness, vice versa. Nothing is all good or all bad. And there is room for all of those personality types in any business. Personally, I lean towards big picture thinking, creativity, personal relationships, that side of the spectrum. I lean away from detail, and some of those other sort of what I consider more boring areas, but a lot of other people consider really fascinating areas. I like the terminology, lean away to and lean towards to. I quite like that terminology because the way that DISC reporting is now, there's a lot of continuums.
That's right.
Which says that you have part of this. It's not you in this box or in this box. These continuums, and you can compare your continuums with your team as well. And it's a much truer way of looking at behaviour.
To be honest, if I did the test now, the result that I would get now would be completely different to what I would have got 10 years ago.
Yeah, so...
we changed.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not pigeonholed. What's important is to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, understand that that's not right or wrong, that's just you.
Yeah. Surround
yourself with the people that complement those other areas that you don't necessarily have, and appreciate those differences, because there is risk in saying this is, the halo or the cloning effect. This is me, this is what I like to work with, I'm going to surround myself with more of me.
Yeah.
It's really dangerous.
Do you know, many years ago, it's slightly off topic, but it makes me laugh every time when you talk like that, is I was working for a pet care company as a consultant. I was doing some work for them, and we're doing a sales training course, and at the end of in one of the breaks of the courses, there was something like 20 people in this course, or 25 people in this course, and 22 or 23 of them were all outside smoking. So everybody who'd been hired was a smoker. It was like, I've never seen anything like it in my life, and so it's interesting how we do kind of employ people like us when that's not really what we need.
I think you only need to look as far away as the difficulties we're seeing in Australian politics at the moment to see that there is a certain degree of like us that happens in recruitment practices. Every business has a little bit of that, and it's difficult to step outside of it. Diversity is important, but diversity for diversity's sake doesn't often work, provided we're looking legitimately to fill skills, being honest about what we bring to the table, and knowing that we need to find people that complement that don't just mirror that. I think that is the key message.
Now, at the risk of using, again, a bit of a trendy word, authenticity is something that I truly and utterly believe in as a leader. I think if you're not, you'll get caught out. What's your take on that?
I couldn't agree more. And maybe that buzzword of authenticity isn't as authentic as it could be.
That's true. That's so true.
Authenticity, if it's genuine, which by definition it must be, it's critical. We talked about the DISC model, personality profiling. One of the risks of those things is that in the back of your mind, you think this person's a particular type. They need me to be able to behave in a particular way to cut through. I just don't think it works. And the reason I say that is because none of us are good enough actors to play the role that we think the other person needs us to play. And that's even predicated upon us guessing right in the first place, which is a dark art. So I really believe that if you are genuine and you are coming from the right place, so we come back to that servant leadership model we spoke of earlier, you genuinely want to help, to serve, to improve. You're authentic with the way that you communicate, regardless of the personality type of the other person or even the socioeconomic level of the other person. This could be talking to boards, this could be talking to frontline employees. I think you will come across well because you're genuine, you're honest, you're open, and you're trying to get the right outcome. So for me, it could not be more important.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's too easy to take a stance, to take a position, have a conversation with somebody as a leader, and you're not truly listening. You're hearing some stuff come through from them, but because you're so engrossed and or so stuck in your own position, that you're not really listening to what they've got to say. And I think that's a dangerous play.
No, it is. And you've reminded me of the 3 C's, which I know that
here we go.
I know that you laughed at. I know that you laughed at this, and it's deliberate. I can spell, I promise.
Listen carefully, folks.
So the 3 C's of leadership is courage, curiosity, and kindness. Okay, yes, it starts with a K, but it's a K. Okay, and the reason I raise that, that's curiosity. Okay, if you're wading into a conversation without curiosity, go back to that example I gave you at the beginning. I had no curiosity towards that other employer's position.
Yeah.
No, I charged in with courage, maybe, pig-headedness and stupidity for sure, but that curiosity is so important, and it's amazing what you can learn if you listen and you ask questions. Like you hear about the 5 whys and those types of tools. They're really, really valuable tools if they're used properly.
Amazing.
But that curiosity, trying to really uncover what's going on, and it's so important. Absolutely so important. Kindness as well, understated trait in a leader. You need to genuinely care for people. I do talk a lot about servant-based leadership, and it is, in my view, very, very important. You can be delivering a hard message. You can be terminating someone's employment. If you do it with kindness and that person walks out the door and still able to hold their head high, then I think you've done the right thing. You don't need to beat someone over the head with a bad message.
That came out on the last episode, in fact, with Jason Lowe from the payroll specialist. And they had a lady that had come on board, and if I remember the story rightly, she'd been there for 10 years. Like, she came on board as a casual employee, but ended up 10 years. But it was time for her to go. And he spoke, actually there was a couple of examples where he spoke about at the time the person was peeved about being told it's all over and this is not going to work. But later on, they came back to me and said that was the best thing you could have done, and thanked him for it.
Yeah.
And that can only come because of a kindness of heart.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting one. There's the courage to make the hard decision, and then there's the kindness in the way that you deliver it. So that they all tie together quite nicely. Yeah,
and I've seen leaders over the years struggle with that as well, because as much as it's the right decision for the business, the heart comes into it and goes, I don't really want to upset this person, and this is their livelihood, or this is their, their way of surviving the world, and I'm now affecting that, and so the emotions come into play, which make it even harder, make it even more difficult.
Yeah.
So you're now at the zoo. There's, as I said earlier, an eclectic bunch. How do you feed this support up to your middle managers and train them and support them to do what you want them to do at the next level for their people?
Yeah,
that's hard work.
That's tough. It's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting. So I had a moment earlier this year. So we have been through 3 years of the worst drought on record.
Yeah,
and I'm talking to the point where we were counting down the days to when Dubbo was going to run out of water. And at the zoo, we were writing contingency plans for which moats we would let run dry in what order, because that would mean animals either coming off display or potentially being moved to other facilities. Like literally a step-by-step shutdown based on water. Frightening.
Wow.
Absolutely frightening. Coupled then straight afterwards with a summer of bushfires that impacted all of New South Wales and large parts of Australia. Coupled then with COVID shutdown. On top of that, I can't imagine a time in leadership where that was harder. I've always thought that as a leader, you can easily do it on the good days, but it's the bad days that you really earn your stripes, and that's when you need to step up. So that being the case, we had some really tough messages to give to the team. So I went with my managers to talk to their teams with them. So we stood side by side to deliver that message, which I thought was the right thing to do, until I got about 3 months down the track and realised that I personally wasn't really coping, and that was taking a toll. And you notice the resilience, you notice that your temper's shorter and that you are more tired and that your ability to focus is impaired and a lot of these types of things.
This was a common thing, actually. This is an interesting
leadership
point.
Burnout. And you don't see it coming and you don't feel it. And I thought I was doing the right things. But in fact, I really wasn't. I took the step to seek some help at this point, which I'm so glad I did. I had a conversation with a person who, no matter how much you think there's always an epiphany, okay? Who said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, I explained, like, it's the right thing to do. It's, tough times, you stand up, blah, blah, blah. He said, no, I understand that. He said, it's taking a personal toll on you, right? I said, yes, it is. And he said, do you think that your managers are any better at doing this now because you've done it for them? I said, no, not really. And he said, so you've run yourself into the ground. Yes, you've looked after the frontline team, but have you actually looked after your intermediate middle management level by doing their job for them? He said, what happens if you're not there for them to do it next time? Because now all they'll do is turn around and say, where's Steve? I can't do this.
Yeah.
And that was such a great penny dropping moment that then, invariably the next crisis rolls through. And my approach now is to say that the support is there. I'll help you as much as you need to, but I want you to have a crack at this. And I want you to do it. And let's talk about how you're going to do it, give you a chance to do it. Then we can regroup afterwards and talk about how it went. But I'm not going to do it for you in the first instance because it doesn't help you grow and it actually doesn't help me.
No, the burden. And I think yours is in many ways an analogy for many leaders through COVID. There was many who were suffering burnout. There were many going, what the hell are we going to do? The uncertainty was at an all-time high. Other businesses got so darn busy that even became a problem of how to manage a really busy business, which I imagine the zoo has gone nuts now, right? Because we've opened up borders. And
regional New South Wales is seeing a tourism boom like never before. We've done record month after record month since we reopened the doors in July or in June last year. So for us, that workload is thrown on top of all of the other.
How do you manage people now? Because I would imagine that people are now under the pump even more than they were. So your staff are under the pump. There's some more pressure in there. You want to be the best zoo in the world. So greater pressures on you. How do you manage that?
Look, the key really is being honest with ourselves about what we can do and what we can't do. Trying to prioritise what's important and let some other things go because you can't do everything in that sort of workload. Resources are finite. People have only got so many hours in the day. We can't assume that people are going to be able to do absolutely everything. So we pick the eyes out of it. We get the important stuff done. And some of that other stuff, we'll do it next year. We wrote a blog only this month called Control the Controllables. Yeah, so it's the same thing. Yeah.
And how are your team handling the pressure and the numbers and the greater numbers? Are they...
Yeah, I think they're very proud of what they've achieved. There is a real sense that we have been contributing to driving the economic recovery of regional New South Wales after the disastrous drought and the bushfires. Tourism's been at the forefront of bringing those economies back. So there's real pride in that, and I think there's a commitment to continue that. But every day is different. There's days when the guys come in, and, they're worn out. And that's a reality, and we need to acknowledge that, and
absolutely,
just try and give people the space they need to be able to come back again the next day.
Tell me, if you were to think of a leader that you aspire to or you look towards or influences you, is there one or two or three types of persons? And if so, why?
Yeah, there's actually not.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I've played this game a number of times over the years, and I've always, personally, I found it difficult to go beyond the cliched sporting leaders, political leaders, and those sorts of things. Probably someone that I really do get a lot of good information from and challenging of thinking is Simon Sinek on LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan. Huge fan of some of the ways that he's able to communicate really complicated concepts in really accessible ways.
And in a very slap your face style sometimes as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. The other one is Professor Brian Cox. This is a bit out there. Brian Cox is an astrophysicist.
Right.
Does great documentaries called The Human Universe.
Okay.
Now I love that concept, the human universe, right?
Yeah.
It's and it's about, he talks about astrophysics as a celebration of humanity. So cool.
Yeah, nice.
Really, really good. He was also in a boy band back in the 1980s, but that's a side note. Check him out. He's really good. But similar, takes extremely complicated topics and makes it really accessible and really entertaining, which if anyone can make astrophysics accessible and entertaining, then you are a damn good communicator.
I think, that's a really interesting point, because my lesson from that right now is so many leaders take simple stuff and make it complicated.
So true.
And why are you doing that?
Because it makes you seem more impressive.
Yes, that's right.
That's not the end game. So yeah, take the complicated, make it simple, and that's, I think
is a better approach. Yeah. Top 2 or 3 tips. If you were mentoring a new up and coming leader, or you probably are anyway, what would be some top 2 or 3 tips or lessons you'd give them?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we touch back on what we talked about earlier. The first thing is understand yourself. Yeah. Really be able to define your values.
Yeah.
Okay, and look at your future. Most careers are stepping from one job to the next, and that you end up in a destination that you never realise you were headed towards. Okay, take the time now to stop and go, in 15 years, what's that career defining job that I want to have? Work backwards from there, and that's your development plan.
Awesome. Steve Hinks, fantastic to have you. Great conversation as always. I'm looking forward to getting this up and the listeners giving us some feedback on it. But thanks again for your time, mate. It's been great.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Folks, stay tuned over the next few months. I've got some amazing people coming on board. Some people like the head of Bunnings and the head of Accor Hotels are coming on board to talk to us as well. So you're in good company, and all goes well. I'm going to try and score actually a sports leader if I can, so we'll see how that goes. Again, thanks for listening, and I look forward to chatting in our next podcast. Take care.